Diane Ellison, we need to talk about the meal eligibility roster leaving the school.
I run this lunchroom. My process those applications.
DE operated without oversight for over a decade as the cafeteria manager and federal lunch program administrator at this elementary school. 230 children depended on her to guard the one piece of information the law works hardest to protect. Not one person checked.
Bulk student names who qualifies as low income sent outside the district.
Roster day, I administer the program.
On days you had no meal program reason to, and payments came back to
I
you.
look at this list all the time. That isn't a crime.
The detective standing in front of her did not need an answer. The screenshots were already printed. The dates were already circled. The bank records were already in the folder. Within 72 hours, the Sherwood Springs Community School District would issue a public statement confirming that the protected eligibility records of approximately 230 children had been disclosed outside the building. Every one of those children was enrolled at Linden Creek Elementary Middle School. Every one of those records had been pulled, exported, and sold by Donna Eileen Hargrove, the woman in the Navy cafeteria apron, the woman who had handed those same children their lunch trays every weekday for the last decade. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something, because this case is going to sit with you, and I want it to sit with all of us. When you were a kid in school, do you remember who got the free lunches and who didn't? Be honest in the comments. Tell me whether the cafeteria staff in your school protected that information, or whether everybody knew. I read every comment on cases like this. And if you're new here, hit subscribe right now. This channel exists because stories like this one don't get the coverage they deserve. And the only way these victims get heard is if people like you keep watching. Donna Eileen Hargrove was born in October of 1975 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the middle child of a family that had been in the food service business in one form or another for 2 generations. Her father ran the meat counter at a Hy-Vee in town for 31 years. Her mother worked the morning prep shift at a small diner off First Avenue, the kind of place where the same 6 men in feed store caps came in at 5:30 every morning and ordered the same eggs and the same coffee for the same prices they had paid in 1989. Donna grew up watching her mother arrive home at 2 in the afternoon, smelling of bacon grease and fryer oil, and she grew up understanding that food service work meant being on your feet, being early, and being reliable in a way that very few other jobs in town required. She graduated from Jefferson High School in 1993 with average grades and no clear plan. She enrolled at Kirkwood Community College that fall for a culinary certificate program, finished 3 of the 4 required terms, and stopped attending in the spring of 1995 after her mother had a small stroke, and Donna moved back into her parents' house to help with rent. She took a job at a Bishop's Cafeteria in a strip mall on the west side of Cedar Rapids, one of the old-school self-serve places with the steam tables and the plastic trays and the elderly regulars who came in at 4 for the early bird Salisbury steak. She worked at Bishop's for almost 3 years. She liked it. She liked the rhythm of it. She liked the way the same faces came through the line every Tuesday, and the way her supervisor, a woman named Loretta, never had to write anything down because she remembered everyone's allergies and everyone's grandkids. In 1998, Donna married Mark Hargrove, a diesel mechanic from a smaller town about 40 minutes east called Sherwood Springs. Mark had a job at the freight yard outside of town and a small house with a fenced yard and a 2-car garage and a sycamore tree in the back. Donna moved out to Sherwood Springs that summer. She was 23 years old. The town had a population of just under 4,000 people. There was 1 grocery store, 1 gas station with a subway inside it, 1 community pool, and 1 school complex on the north end of Maple Street that housed every child in the district from kindergarten through 8th grade in 2 connected brick buildings. That school complex was called Linden Creek Elementary Middle School. By the end of that first summer, Donna had a part-time job there as a line server in the cafeteria, working the breakfast and lunch shifts 5 days a week for $8.75 an hour. She was, by every account that has surfaced since, very good at the job. The lead cook at the time was a woman named Phyllis Strode, 61 years old, in her 34th year with the district. Phyllis wrote in Donna's first annual evaluation that she was quick on the line, careful with the trays, gentle with the smaller children, and willing to stay late when the dishwashers were short. The principal who countersigned that evaluation added a single line at the bottom in blue ink. "Donna is a real find. We want to keep her." They kept her. She took on more hours after her 2 children were born, a son in 2001, a daughter in 2003, and she was promoted to assistant kitchen supervisor in 2008. The role came with a small raise, a set of keys to the dry storage room, and the responsibility for ordering produce on Thursdays. In 2011, she completed a state-certified school nutrition manager training course in Des Moines, a 40-hour program that covered food safety law, allergen protocols, and the basics of the National School Lunch Program reimbursement system. She passed the certification exam with a score in the high 80s. She came home with a laminated card in her wallet and a binder of federal regulations that she kept on a shelf in her kitchen at home, because there was no shelf for it at school. In the fall of 2014, Phyllis Strode retired after 36 years. The district promoted Donna into the cafeteria manager position the same week. She was 39 years old. The job came with a salary of $42,400, single health coverage through the district, and a small windowless office at the back of the kitchen that had a metal desk, a beige desktop computer, a 4-drawer filing cabinet, and a laminated chart of allergen color codes taped to the wall. The previous occupant had left behind a coffee mug shaped like an apple. Donna kept it. She used it for pens. For the next 9.5 years, Donna ran the lunchroom at Linden Creek. She arrived every weekday morning at 5:45. She supervised 3 line servers, 2 cashiers, and a part-time dishwasher. She placed the food orders. She managed the inventory. She wrote the weekly menus that went home in the backpacks of every child in the building. She handled the parent phone calls about allergies and milk substitutions, and the children who came through the line without lunch money. She was, in the words of the principal, who eventually had to stand at a press conference and answer for what came next, one of the most trusted adults in this building, full stop. She was also, by all available evidence, well liked. The cafeteria staff brought a sheet cake into the break room on her birthday every October. The kindergarten teachers wrote her name on the thank you cards they sent to support staff at the end of the year. The custodian's wife included Donna and Mark on the Christmas card list. And every August at the back-to-school open house, parents who had grown up in Sherwood Springs themselves, parents who had eaten Phyllis Strode's chicken nuggets in that same lunchroom 20 years earlier, would walk their own kindergartners through the cafeteria line and stop to introduce themselves to the woman with the navy apron and the apple-shaped pen mug. They told their children that this was Mrs. Hargrove, and that Mrs. Hargrove was going to take very good care of them. To understand what Donna Hargrove had access to, and to understand why the law treats that access the way it does, you have to understand how the National School Lunch Program actually works at the building level. Most people picture a free lunch as a simple act of kindness. A child without money for food gets fed. The reality is a federal benefits program with annual budgets in the tens of billions of dollars, administered through every public school district in the country, with a roster of qualifying children maintained at each individual school by a designated building-level administrator. In Linden Creek Elementary Middle School, that administrator was Donna Hargrove. Here is how the process worked in her building. At the start of every school year, the district sent home a single-page form with every enrolled student. The form asked the household to list every person living in the home, every source of income, and the total monthly household earnings. Families that fell at or below 130% of the federal poverty guideline qualified for free meals. Families between 130 and 185% qualified for reduced price meals at 40 cents. Families above that threshold paid full price, $2.75 a tray. Parents returned the forms to the school in sealed envelopes. The forms went directly to Donna's office. Donna opened them. Donna typed the eligibility decisions into the meal program module of the district's student information system. Donna kept the paper applications in a locked drawer of her metal filing cabinet. The roster Donna built from those applications was not a list anyone else in the building was supposed to see. The cashier at the register didn't see it. The teachers didn't see it. The principal saw aggregate counts only. How many free meals had been served on a given day? How many reduced? How many full price? The whole point of the federal scheme is that no child standing in line at the steam table is ever supposed to know who is paying what. The cashier swipes a card. The card returns a green light. The tray gets handed across the counter. The next kid steps up. The system runs on the daily small assumption that the cafeteria, the kindest, most non-judgmental part of a school day, will guard that information harder than almost anything else in the building. The Russell National School Lunch Act says so explicitly. The statute that governs the program contains a confidentiality provision that is, in some ways, stricter than the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Eligibility status cannot be disclosed to outside parties without written parental consent. It cannot be used for marketing. It cannot be used by debt collectors. It cannot be shared with churches, charities, retailers, or community organizations, no matter how well-meaning. The Federal Nutrition Unit publishes a guidance document every year that runs to 47 pages, and the entire document boils down to one rule: the names of the poor children stay in the building. The district's data system was built with that rule in mind. Every time someone logged into the student information system, the login was timestamped. Every time someone opened the meal program module, the action was logged. Every time someone exported a report, the export was logged with the user account, the time, the file size, and the type of report generated. The log sat quietly in the background, running on the district's central server in a closet at the high school administration building 4 blocks away. Nobody looked at the logs. There was no need to. The logs were there for the day someone gave them a reason. The first export that investigators would later flag as outside the scope of any legitimate task happened on a Wednesday afternoon in March of 2023. The school was on a half-day for parent-teacher conferences. The cafeteria had served only breakfast that morning. There was no lunch service, no reimbursement claim to file, no daily count to reconcile, no meal program reason for Donna Hargrove to be logged into the eligibility roster at all. At 1:43 in the afternoon, she opened the meal program module from her office computer. At 1:47, she ran a full eligibility export, formatted as a comma-separated values file containing the names, grade levels, parent contact information, household sizes, and free or reduced status of every qualifying child in the building. The file was 417 kilobytes. It contained 231 names. She saved it to a USB drive. She logged out at 1:51. The whole thing took 8 minutes. The payment landed in a checking account at a small credit union in Sherwood Springs 4 days later. It was for $1,200. The deposit was made by an electronic transfer from a business account registered to a marketing services company based 3 states away. Donna had opened the credit union account jointly with her husband in 1999. The account had been used for almost 25 years to receive her paychecks, pay the electric bill, and absorb the occasional Christmas Club deposit. The $1,200 transfer from the marketing company was the first deposit in the history of the account that did not come from the school district, an employer of her husband, the federal government, or a state tax refund. It was not the last. Over the following 16 months, Donna Hargrove would run 41 separate bulk exports from the meal program module. The pattern was consistent. She ran the exports on days when the building was either empty or operating on a non-standard schedule. Half days, professional development days, the Friday before spring break, the week between Christmas and New Year's when she was the only food service staff member in the building to take inventory. She layered the exports into normal-looking administrative work, opening the module to add a new student application, then running a full roster export immediately afterward, then closing the module and going back to the application she had been pretending to process. The reports she generated were not the kind of report she would have needed to run her cafeteria. They were the kind of report you would generate if you were selling a mailing list. The payments came in matching rhythm. $1,200 after the March 2023 export, $900 after a smaller one in April, 1,500 after a comprehensive one in August, when the new school year's eligibility decisions were freshly processed and the roster was at its most current. Over the 18-month period, the total deposited into the Hargroves' joint checking account from the marketing company would come to just under $41,000. It was not life-changing money. It was the kind of money that paid for a new, high-efficiency furnace, a used Toyota for the daughter who was about to start college, a long weekend at a casino in the Quad Cities, and a riding lawnmower that Mark had been wanting for 3 summers. The roster Donna was selling was not a generic mailing list. It was a list of poor children, by name. The buyer's side of the arrangement is omitted here intentionally, because what matters for this case is not what the buyer did with the information, but the fact that the information left the building at all. Some of the children on the list were 8 years old, some were 11, some were 13. All of them had families who had filled out a single-page form in a sealed envelope at the start of the school year on the federal government's promise that the contents of that envelope would never leave the cafeteria manager's locked filing cabinet. The families noticed nothing at first. There was no charge on a credit card. There was no missing money. There was no obvious theft. Their children kept coming home with chicken nuggets and milk cartons and pizza-shaped rectangles of cardboard described on the menu as cheese pizza. The line moved the way it always moved. The cashier swiped the card. The light turned green. The tray came across the counter. Mrs. Hargrove smiled at the smaller ones and asked the older ones about their weekends and said happy birthday to the kids whose names she had memorized because the dates were in the same database she was selling. The scheme would have continued indefinitely. Donna had built it carefully. She had used her real account because she had needed to. The access logging is anchored to the credential, but she had timed the exports to the building's quiet hours, layered them into ordinary work, and varied the file sizes enough to look like the natural ebb and flow of an active eligibility roster. She had not bragged. She had not told a coworker. She had not even told Mark, though Mark had spent the $41,000 alongside her and had presumably wondered, at some point, where the new furnace money had come from. There were no text messages, there were no DMs, there was no notebook. Donna Hargrove was not careless. She was disciplined. She had a system, and the system worked. The scheme came apart not because anyone in the building noticed, and not because the Federal Nutrition Unit ran a flag, and not because the district's IT department happened to look at the logs. The scheme came apart because in August of 2024, a woman named Marisol Vega, the mother of a third-grade boy at Linden Creek, opened her mailbox at her apartment off Route 22 and pulled out a glossy 4-color flyer addressed to her son by his first and last name. The flyer was from a regional company offering discounted enrollment in a private supplemental tutoring program. The pitch was specifically targeted at, in the flyer's own words, families participating in federally subsidized meal programs. The flyer said that her son had been identified as a candidate for the program. The flyer offered a sliding scale fee. The flyer was personalized. It used her son's name. It used her son's school. It used the words free or reduced price meal recipient. Marisol Vega had never told anyone outside the school that her son was on the free lunch program. She had not told her sister. She had not told her neighbors. She had not told her son. Her son did not know. The whole reason her son did not know was that she had filled out the form in the sealed envelope 2 years in a row, precisely because the school had promised her that nobody outside the cafeteria manager's office would ever know either. She stood in the parking lot of her apartment building, holding the flyer for a long time. Then she went inside and called the school. She asked to speak to the principal. She read the flyer aloud. She asked the principal a single question. She asked how a company 3 states away had her son's name, her address, and her son's confidential federal benefit status. The principal did not have an answer. The principal said she would call back. The principal walked down the hall to the office of the district's data privacy officer, a woman named Karen Bowder, who covered the entire district from a small office at the Central Administration Building. Karen Bowder listened. Karen Bowder asked the principal to forward the flyer. Karen Bowder opened a confidential inquiry the same afternoon. Within a week, 3 more families had come forward. A grandmother who had received an unsolicited phone call from a debt consolidation service that opened with the phrase, "Because your grandson qualifies for free school meals." A mother who had received a text message offering enrollment in a state-subsidized internet program for, again, free lunch families. A father whose daughter had been mailed a personalized brochure for a clothing assistance charity that used the same federal poverty language. All 4 families had children at Linden Creek. None of the 4 families had children at any other school. The common factor was the building. Karen Bowder pulled the district's IT director, a man named Glenn McClary, into a meeting on the 2nd Tuesday of September. She closed the door. She told him she needed a complete access and export log for the meal program eligibility module, going back 2 years, every user account, every action, every file. Glenn pulled the report by Friday. The report was 43 pages long. 40 of those pages were ordinary. 3 of those pages were not. The 3 pages were a cluster of bulk exports, all run from the same user account, all run on days the building had no meal program activity, all timed for the quiet hours of the afternoon. The user account was Hargrove. The exports went back nearly 18 months. The earliest was the March 2023 export. The most recent was 3 weeks earlier, the last Friday in August, the first quiet day after the new school year's eligibility decisions had been processed. 41 exports in total, every one of them outside the scope of any task Donna Hargrove had any business performing on those dates. Karen Bowder called the superintendent. The superintendent, Dr. Lewis Tarrant, called the district's outside counsel. Outside counsel called the State Department of Education's Nutrition Unit and the Sherwood County Sheriff's Office. Within 10 days, the matter was sitting on the desk of a detective named Brian Pfeiffer in the Financial Crimes Unit, a man who had spent 22 years in the department and had never, in all that time, opened a case file involving the sale of a list of poor children. Detective Pfeiffer started with the logs. The logs were the entire case. Every export Donna Hargrove had run was time-stamped, account-stamped, and recorded with the file size and the type of report. Pfeiffer requested a subpoena for the district's full data, and he had it within 4 days. He sat in a conference room at the sheriff's office with Glenn McClary and Karen Bowder and a deputy who knew how to read spreadsheets, and the 4 of them mapped every export against Donna's daily schedule for the previous 18 months. The schedule was straightforward: Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Breakfast at 7, lunch at 11, inventory and ordering in the afternoon, reconciliation of the federal reimbursement claim by 3. The exports did not line up with the reimbursement claim. The exports lined up with the half days. From the logs, they moved to the money. Pfeiffer subpoenaed Donna and Mark Hargrove's joint checking account at the Sherwood Springs Federal Credit Union. The credit union complied within 72 hours. The statements covered the same 18-month window. The pattern was instant. Every export was followed, within 4 to 7 days, by an electronic deposit from an LLC registered to an address in a state Donna had no professional or personal connection to. The deposits ranged from $600 to $1,900. The total over the 18 months came to $40,850. Pfeiffer subpoenaed the LLC. The LLC was a small marketing services firm that resold targeted contact lists to a network of buyers: supplemental education companies, state subsidy enrollment agencies, certain charities, certain less reputable buyers further downstream. The LLC's bookkeeper turned over the corresponding ledger. The ledger listed 41 separate purchases from a contact named D. Hargrove, each one tagged with a delivery date and a file description. The file descriptions matched the exports. The dollar amounts matched the deposits. The case was, at that point, effectively complete. Pfeiffer still needed the human side. He interviewed 23 families whose children appeared on the exported rosters and who had received downstream contact from buyers. The interviews were the worst part of the case. A mother described the moment she realized that her daughter's third-grade teacher might have seen the flyer in her mailbox and now knew her family qualified for free lunch. A grandmother described having to explain to a 10-year-old why a stranger on the phone had called him one of the lower-income kids. A father who had moved his family to Sherwood Springs precisely because he believed it was the kind of small town where his children's circumstances would be nobody else's business, said only that he was, quote, considering pulling them out of the school. He did not finish the sentence. We're heading into the confrontation now, and then into what the prosecutor is building. If this case has kept your attention this far, that's because the story deserved to be told properly. And the only reason it gets told at all is because people like you sit through the whole thing instead of scrolling past. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We cover cases the major outlets ignore, and we do it every single week. The sheriff's office made contact with Donna Hargrove at the school on a Thursday afternoon in October of 2024. They did not arrest her on school grounds. They had agreed with the superintendent that no part of the contact would happen in front of any child. Detective Pfeiffer and a uniformed deputy met her at the door of the kitchen at 2:45, after the last lunch had been served and the last tray had been wiped down. They asked her to step into her office and to close the door. She did. Pfeiffer was carrying a folder. He set the folder on her metal desk next to the apple-shaped pen mug. He told her that the sheriff's office had a warrant for her arrest on charges of theft of protected information, computer-related fraud, and unauthorized disclosure of confidential program records. He told her that the warrant was based on a complete forensic audit of the district's meal program system, which had identified 41 unauthorized bulk exports tied to her user credentials over the previous 18 months. He told her that the sheriff's office had also reviewed her financial records and identified corresponding payments. He paused. He asked her if she understood what he had just said. She sat very still in her desk chair. She was still wearing her navy apron. Her hands were folded in her lap. She did not cry. She did not deny. She did not ask to see the folder. She looked at Detective Pfeiffer for a long moment, and then she said, quietly, "The kids never knew, did they?" Pfeiffer was not sure, at first, what she was asking. He asked her to clarify. She did not clarify. She said it again, in the same flat voice. The kids never knew. Pfeiffer told her that he was not in a position to answer that question. He told her that some of the families had received outside communications referencing their children's status by name, and that those families had spoken to their children about it. Donna closed her eyes. She did not open them for several seconds. When she opened them, she looked past Pfeiffer at the laminated allergen chart on the wall. "I want a lawyer," she said. Pfeiffer nodded. He told her she was being placed under arrest. He read her the Miranda rights from a small card he carried in his shirt pocket. The deputy stepped forward and asked her to stand. She stood. The deputy did not handcuff her in the office. They walked her out through the back hallway of the school, the one that connected the kitchen to the loading dock, the one no child ever used. The handcuffs went on at the back of the patrol vehicle. She did not say anything else. The superintendent had asked the sheriff's office to time the arrest for after dismissal, so that no student in the building would see it. The sheriff's office had honored the request. The only people who saw Donna Hargrove walk out of Linden Creek Elementary Middle School for the last time were one custodian, 2 cafeteria co-workers, and the principal, who watched from her office window with her hand pressed flat against the glass. The formal charging document was filed in the Sherwood County District Court 8 days after the arrest. The county attorney's office, led by a prosecutor named Renata Kovich, charged Donna Eileen Hargrove with 11 counts in the initial filing. 1 count of ongoing criminal conduct, 3 counts of computer-related fraud, 3 counts of theft of protected information, 2 counts of unauthorized disclosure of confidential program records, and 2 counts of identity theft-related conduct stemming from the disclosure of identifying information belonging to specific named children. Kovich indicated in the filing that the state was also coordinating with federal authorities on potential additional charges under the National School Lunch Act's confidentiality provisions and the federal computer fraud statutes, given that the underlying program is federally administered and the disclosed records are protected under federal law. Donna Hargrove appeared at her initial hearing the following Monday in a tan jail jumpsuit, with her wrists shackled to a chain at her waist. Her attorney, a defense lawyer from Cedar Rapids named Jeffrey Pellman, entered a plea of not guilty on her behalf and asked the court to set a reasonable bond on the basis that his client had no prior criminal history, deep ties to the community, and no flight risk. The court set bond at $100,000 cash or surety. The Hargroves' adult son posted the bond by Wednesday afternoon, using equity from his parents' house. Donna was released that evening and ordered to surrender her passport, refrain from any contact with the school district or any current or former Linden Creek student or family, and submit to electronic monitoring pending trial. The district moved on its own track. The superintendent placed Donna on unpaid administrative leave the day of her arrest, and the school board voted unanimously at its next meeting to terminate her employment, effective immediately. The State Department of Education's Nutrition Unit opened a separate administrative proceeding to permanently disqualify her from any role in any publicly funded nutrition program in any state, a designation that, once finalized, would follow her for life. The state board that issues food service manager certifications opened its own proceeding to revoke her certification. None of those processes required a criminal conviction. All three were already in motion before her first court appearance was over. The school sent letters home to the families of every child whose eligibility record had been disclosed. The letter was 3 pages long. It explained, in plain language, what had happened, when it had happened, what information had been exposed, and what the district was doing in response. The district offered every affected family 1 year of free identity monitoring services, 2 community meetings with the data privacy officer, and a direct line to a victim services advocate at the county attorney's office. The principal stood at the first of those community meetings on a Tuesday evening in late October in front of roughly 90 parents, and she apologized. She did not blame anyone else. She did not blame the system. She said the building had failed the children and that the building was sorry. The most difficult conversations were the ones that happened in the homes themselves. The families that had told their younger children nothing now had to decide whether to tell them. The families with older children who had already received outside contact had to find words for an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old about why a stranger had known something that was supposed to be private. The school counselor reported, in the weeks after the disclosures, an increase in students asking quietly whether the other kids in the building could tell who was on free lunch. The counselor told them no. The counselor told them the same thing the federal law had told their families when their families had signed the form. The counselor was telling them the truth as far as the building could control it, but the building had stopped controlling it 18 months earlier on a Wednesday afternoon at 1:43. Donna Hargrove's criminal case remains pending as of this dramatization. No verdict has been reached. No sentence has been imposed. The case is scheduled for trial in the coming months, and federal charges may or may not attach before then. What is known is that the access logs are not in dispute, the financial records are not in dispute, the LLC's ledger is not in dispute, and the families on the receiving end of the downstream contact are not in dispute. What is in dispute is what a Sherwood County jury, made up of people who shop at the one grocery store and fill up at the one gas station and have children or grandchildren in the same school complex, will decide to do with a woman who sat in the kindest seat in the building and sold a list of poor children by name. This case was hard to sit with, but the case on your screen right now, the one about a school employee who used the seat of trust in a very different way, is the one that has stayed with me longer than almost any case we've covered. Click it now.